Hello, I'm Velma Candias. This is number 0823, the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0823. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, we remember Emmy Award-winning producer-director Jeff Margolis, who recently passed away. Jeff wanted to be in television from the time he was a little kid.
From the time I was 5 years old, I had a dream. 5 years old, my dad was in the electronics business. And one night he brought home this little box with a piece of glass on the front of it. He plugged it into the wall. And there were people inside that box. And I couldn't figure out how they got in there. And I became fascinated with television. I started dreaming about one day being involved in television somehow. And as I got older, I learned that there was a director who told the people what to do and took the camera shots and all that.
Jerry Jamison is the author of Vanishing Act, a crashed airline, faked death, and backroom abortions. This was the true story of Dr. Robert Spears, who blew up a plane, killing all the passengers just to avoid justice himself.
The plane event is kind of the culmination of the most outrageous life that perhaps was ever lived in terms of a con man and a fraudster. And it was digging up the facts of his life that turned out to be the most fascinating part of the story. He had been arrested in Los Angeles and was going to try, was on bail, and he knew beyond a shadow of a doubt he was going to be convicted.
Kathleen Troy, author of Dear Dylan's Dog Squad, who shares a tip or two on dog training. The dog owner has to be trained as well as their pet.
Most problems are on the other end of the leash. They just want to please you, and they want a job. So you're already halfway home. All you have to do is just work with them and create a bond. It's pretty easy. Even though they're domestic animals, you have to realize what they were originally purposed for, and that there was a time when they were used to herd sheep. So they will want to push you along. They want to nip at your ankles. They were used to hunt vermin. So they'll want to dig in your garden and things like that. So those traits never really go away. They're still there.
Andrew Fazekas, the night sky guy, on private companies going into space.
I think this is a really interesting development, and it's not really talked about much in terms of space exploration and the access to space. You know, one of the big movements right now is democratizing access to space, meaning that there is a lowering of the cost barrier of launching missions to low Earth orbit and being able to have this accessible to companies, to researchers particularly.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news, dad joke theater, morning shower thoughts, and an idiot of the day. The guest later, the person who told you that this was show number 0823, was Velma Candias, a burlesque dancer who runs Candias Cabaret right here in Montreal. Thank you very much, Velma, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. If you're looking for the best place to survive a zombie apocalypse, a new Flash Picks report has analyzed how well 30 NFL stadiums would hold up as a refuge.
Drop the bat.
I can't. I need to protect myself.
From who?
Zombies!
The State Farm Stadium in Phoenix, Arizona tops the list with a score of 74.7%. The stadium has a number of security features, the field is capable of growing crops, and it has a retractable roof, which will prevent zombie breaches. Unfortunately, the Seahawks Lumen Field received the lowest score at 39.9%. Other high-ranking stadiums for survival include Lambeau Field Arrowhead Stadium and M&T Bank Stadium. By the way, in 7th place is Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, where the Raiders play. That's at 61.9%, which surprises me because half of their fans look like zombies.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun.
Someone in a control tower at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago spotted a strange object in a danger zone. A DoorDash driver. The delivery gig worker reportedly accidentally drove into an unauthorized secured area and went for miles in restricted spaces. He may have even crossed runways. Fortunately, no one was injured and no charges are being filed because it looks like the driver was really just trying to get the food to the right place. It's unclear if the meal eventually made it to its intended final destination.
Get more from your neighborhood, delivered with DoorDash.
Well, that's assuming they can find you. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our first segment here on the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, as of May 18th, Landerneau, France, with a population of only 16,000 on the far western tip of France's Brittany region, holds the distinction of being home to the largest gathering of people dressed as Smurfs. Perhaps because of excitement about this summer's upcoming Smurfs movie.
And take adventure.
It's time for you to find out what a Smurf really is.
To a whole new dimension.
The town gathered 3,076 costumed people together, breaking a record set in Germany in 2019. Wow, that's a lot of Smurfs. There were probably some new Smurfs in the crowd.
I'm Papa Smurf's brother. You Smurfs don't know Smurf about Smurf.
I can smurf that Smurf up and have it delivered to your house.
That sounds like a load of Smurf.
Hey, stick a Smurf in it.
Well, that sounds Smurfed up. Anyway, let's get to our first segment here on the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. Just recently, we lost Emmy Award winner Jeff Margolis, who was one of the most successful live TV event director-producers of all time. We spoke to him a few times just last year when he came out with his memoir entitled We're Live in 5, My Extraordinary Life in Television. Jeff passed away on May 23rd at the age of 78. Here's just a brief part of my conversation with the television legend as he told his story.
From the time I was 5 years old, I had a dream. Seriously, at 5 years old, my dad was in the electronics business. And one night he brought home this little box with a piece of glass on the front of it. He plugged it into the wall, and there were people inside that box. And I couldn't figure out how they got in there. And I became fascinated with television. I started dreaming about one day being involved in television somehow. And as I got older, I learned that there was a director who told the people what to do and took the camera shots and all that. Anyway, when I was going to UCLA Film and Television School, my grandpa said, "You've got a cousin who is moving to Los Angeles. He's coming from Canada through New York. He's coming to Los Angeles. His name is Monty Hall. Even though he's your second cousin, we don't call second cousins. We call them aunts and uncles. So he'll be your Uncle Monty." So Monty came to Los Angeles. My grandfather put us together. I told Monty what my dream was, what I'd been doing. All the way through junior and senior high school, I was always on stage crew and trying to take any class I could to learn about sound and lights and all of that. And so Monty was kind enough to say, "Let me help you." And I said, "I'd love to get a job. I'm going to UCLA now, and I work my schedule out so that I have time to go to school and work." And I said, "I know that the starting point for most people is in the mail room, or as they were called, pages, which is an usher, the people who let the audience in for the shows and make sure they get out of the studio and all of that." I said, "I really don't want to do that. I want to be standing on a stage or be able to go into a control room and really see how everything's done." So he introduced me to the guy who owned the cue card company that was doing cue cards on Let's Make a Deal. And I met with him and he hired me. I started doing cue cards on Let's Make a Deal, and I was able to stand on the stage with the cameras and the boom mics and the stage managers and the prop guys. And I was in heaven. I saw it all coming together the way I always dreamed about it. So he opened the door for me. I left Let's Make a Deal, went to the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, where I became very friendly with Tommy Smothers. May he rest in peace. We just lost him a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
Anyway, Tommy helped me start my own cue card company, gave me the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour as my first show. From there on, I was able to do cue cards on a number of different shows and continue to learn. And then I kept the company running, and I moved up to becoming an associate director, which they're called in television film. They're called an assistant director. So I became an associate director, and then I was on my way. I just flew from there and then went into directing, and then I started in 1968, really, on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, and Let's Make a Deal, 67, 68. And by 1976, I had my own production company.
Was it a big leap for you from the studio floor as with your cue card company? Was it a big leap for you from there to the control room?
Not really. I had spent so much time in the control room, and I used to ask, even though I was only doing cue cards, I used to ask if I could wear a headset, which I would plug into. The cameraman that I was standing next to was always kind enough to let me plug in and listen to what was going on. So I listened and I learned over the headset. And then sometimes I would work it out so that I didn't have to be on the floor during a certain segment of the show, that I could go up into the control room and sit behind the director and watch what was going on. And so I was really determined to continue to move and to get to where I wanted to get as soon as I could get there. And, I'll tell you, sometimes you get unbelievable opportunities like Monty gave me, but you got to have the talent to back it up. Because, people can tell whether you're into it for the right reasons or whether you're just into it for the glory. And you don't make it very far if that's the case. So you need to have the talent to back it up when you get the opportunity, which I did.
The Emmy Award-winning legendary TV director, producer, and the author of his memoir, We're Live in 5, My Extraordinary Life in Television. Jeff died on May 23rd at the age of 78. I urge you to go to our YouTube page for a conversation with Jeff that's almost a half hour long, and he had stories to tell. He will be missed. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0823, and you'll find the link to Jeff's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. And the link that will take you directly to our longer conversation that we had, and it's on YouTube. And we'll get right to our next guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program. Jerry Jamison is the author of Vanishing Act, a crashed airliner, faked death, and backroom abortions. It chronicles a story that started back in 1959 with Dr. Robert Spears, who was the subject of a news headline that said, "Man Downs Airline to Fake Death." Jerry joins us via Zoom from Chula Vista, California. Hi, Jerry.
Well, hello there.
Thanks for being on the program with us.
Yeah, I think your listeners will think this is a fascinating story.
Well, I heard a little bit about the story several years ago, but what made you decide that you wanted to write a full book on this story?
Well, it begs for it, to be honest with you. It really does. And I had just really stumbled across the story. I stumbled across that headline, actually, and it was such a stunning headline that I just started doing research, and my full-time assistant, Julia Estrada, and I spent about a year daily just unearthing. The plane event is kind of the culmination of the most outrageous life that perhaps was ever lived in terms of a con man and a fraudster. And it was digging up the facts of his life that turned out to be the most fascinating part of the story.
Now, as the story goes, it was U.S. Thanksgiving Day in 1959. A plane exploded in midair, killing all 42 passengers and crew. And on the manifest listed was Dr. Robert Spears, only he wasn't on the plane. Tell us why he wasn't on the plane.
Well, he was not on the plane. He had bought a ticket. He was on the manifest. That was the most important thing to him. But he had been arrested in Los Angeles and was on bail, and he was going to trial, and he knew beyond a shadow of a doubt he was going to be convicted. Instead of getting in a car and driving to Mexico, he went to Tampa and basically talked his very best friend, and I can't overemphasize how close they were. They were the best men in each other's weddings. They had a vacation together. They had been close family friends for 40 years. And he said they were both going to go to Dallas for a business meeting. And Dr. Spears said to his good friend, Al Taylor, why don't you take my plane ticket, which you could in 1959. Take my plane ticket. You take my seat. You relax. You have a good time. I'll take your car. Give me your keys, your registration, your license, your wallet, and I'll drive the car to Dallas and we'll meet over there. The only thing I ask of you is, would you please carry this package? It's full of cash and it's for my wife. And as soon as you land, please just drive to my house and give it to my wife. She needs this cash. And that package turned out to be a time bomb. And it blew the entire airliner. So as a result, his name was on the manifest. And the papers, which started coming out the next morning nationwide, actually worldwide, because they knew it was an explosion, listed a renowned OBGYN in Dallas who was numbered among the victims.
Now, this was back in the day before forensics was the name of the game in law enforcement. So I understand that they found Dr. Robert Spears. How did they find him? It was not that long after, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Well, first of all, J. Edgar Hoover made him enemy number one in America, which, obviously focused a lot of attention on him. He had gone into hiding. He had driven across country and went into hiding in a little hideaway shack north of Phoenix, Arizona. And he was hiding there with another friend and really doing quite fine. He was pretty settled in. And he started to miss his wife and children. He dearly loved his wife and children, which we know because I got a hold of love letters that he wrote to her. I was able to secure some of those. And he just started to miss her and the children. By all accounts, he was a wonderful father, a wonderful husband, a dichotomy, obviously. And he started to miss them, and he started to inch closer and closer to Dallas. He would drive by and just look at the house and go to places where she was and kind of hide in the shadows. And the FBI started sniffing around. There was also an entire team at the LAPD, which was called the Abortion Squad, because he was involved in abortion. And they were tracking him. For your listeners that remember that story, Catch Me If You Can, Tom Hanks. And yeah, very similar story in that these LA detectives, they just made it their mission to catch this guy. But in the end, the guy he was staying with in Phoenix that was hiding him out basically called the FBI and said, he's going to be at this motel on this date at this time. Go pick him up. And the only reason he did that is because he himself didn't want to get picked up for crimes that he had committed. So he just turned him in, and there was a chase there that is so cinematic when the FBI is chasing him through the hotel. That's, I don't know, it's part comedy, it's part tragedy for sure.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. As I said, there weren't the amount of forensics available scientifically to the police departments at that time. So he had given his best friend his ticket. He had given his best friend his wallet, and the plane was blown up. So how did they finally realize, without physically catching him, that he was not the one on the plane?
Well, the first indication that something was afoul was the fact that Al Taylor's wife reported to the police that her husband never came home. And the last person he was meeting with was a man by the name of Dr. Robert Spears, and they were meeting in the Tampa International Airport's coffee shop. And after that, no one ever saw him again. So she reported to the police. They didn't take it seriously at all. They were estranged. They said, yeah, he's just out there somewhere. But the strangest thing happened a couple days later. Her son got a packet in the mail, and when he opened it, it turned out to be a life insurance policy, a flight insurance policy that made the son the beneficiary. And she said, why would my husband ever take out flight insurance unless he was getting on a plane? Now, the interesting thing here, again, for your listeners, is that in 1959, there were kiosks, standalone kiosks in every airport where for 10 quarters, you could buy $100,000 worth of flight insurance. So if that plane went down, your beneficiary got $100,000, 10 quarters. What people remember is Al Taylor running off the plane 10 minutes before it was to take off and running to that machine and dropping quarters in that machine. You paid for it, and the kiosks even say, plus a free stamp, and it would mail it to your beneficiary. And so now they said, wait, he was getting on a plane. It was him that got on the plane. Where is Dr. Spears? And that's when the manhunt begins.
So how long between the air crash and the time that Dr. Spears was captured?
About 3 months or so. It was a pretty intense 3 months because he's hiding out the whole time. He's driving all around. As I mentioned, he was an abortionist, and he had set up an entirely new practice. He was very profitable, very wealthy, and he was just right back in business, even though his wife and children thought he had died and they were in agony. There are photographs of her just in excruciating agony when she, when she finds out her husband was killed on the plane crash.
You said they had children, correct?
Yes.
In your research, did you come in contact with the family?
No, I tried desperately. First of all, his son, Dr. Spears, ends up in Alcatraz, incidentally on an abortion charge, nothing to do with the plane because they could not get the evidence. So he's in Alcatraz now, befriended by the Birdman of Alcatraz, of all people. And in the course of that, his son is gravely ill, and turns out he dies. And Spears petitions the prison, the warden, to go to the funeral, and he's denied the privilege. So he's lost his son. His daughter, who would be, I don't know, it's probably in her late 60s now. I tried everything I could to track her down through ancestry, through lineage, and through investigators, and was never able. Obviously, she wanted to bury that part of her life.
Wow. It's a fascinating story. And I'm sure it's something that would make a fascinating film. Are you working on that in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, there are treatments in front of people right now, Netflix and feature film. The story is so much bigger. The plane crash is the capper of the story. His life is so grand, so big, and so unbelievable. He was sentenced once by a judge, and the judge said, "You are the best bad man I have ever come across." And I think that typifies him pretty well.
The book is called Vanishing Act, A Crashed Airliner, Faked Death, and Backroom Abortions by Jerry Jamison. Jerry, thank you very, very much for being on the program with us.
Absolutely. And I should tell your listeners that there's even a Canadian connection in here. So there's a little teaser for you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for being on the program.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Jerry Jamison, author of Vanishing Act, A Crashed Airliner, Faked Death, and Backroom Abortions. You can go to our website at thestufffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0823, and you'll find links to Jerry's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
And now, Dad Joke Theater.
What do you call a shoe made out of a banana? A slipper!
Join us again for another Stuff File program, Dad Joke Theater.
There's still more guests,
more news, and an idiot of the day. Coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like. But the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/The Stuff File program. Coming to you from the outskirts of sanity, this is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
And still to come in the program, we'll have a morning shower thought, plus an idiot of the day, and much more in Stuff File news right here, right now. A couple in Great Abington, Cambridgeshire, England, are distraught after being caught in a scheme to build their dream home. Jeremy and Elaine Zielinski were approved to build a 2-story commercial building on 17 acres for a horse semen collection center and laboratory.
Come again, this time in my ears?
But instead, they constructed a 3-bedroom home. When the local council found out, the planning inspector issued an order to demolish the home within 12 months. The Zielinskis told the council that the COVID-19 pandemic had ruined their business, so they switched gears to turn the property into their home. Said Elaine, "It doesn't make any sense to tear it down. I don't want to go and live in a caravan." She said she and her husband didn't know that converting the property would be illegal, but the inspector dismissed their appeals, saying it had been built as a house from the start. The Zielinskis are seeking legal advice. So, basically, the couple said,
"All right, let's do this."
But they got caught. Nice try. Guards at a prison in Costa Rica caught a drug mule. Actually, that should be a drug cat. It was ferrying more than 230 grams of marijuana and 67 grams of crack cocaine in early May. A guard spotted the tiny black and white feline after it jumped over a periphery fence. After it was caught, packages were cut away from its fur. The courier was turned over to the National Animal Health Service for evaluation. Okay, I've mentioned this time and time again, so you know what I'm going to say. I don't think the cat was a drug mule. I think it was the mastermind, because cats are evil, little pieces of evil plotting against mankind.
Oh my, a talking cat? Scary, isn't it? We must remain on schedule. Our day has come!
They're evil, I say. Mark my words. They're coming for you.
We're trying to take over the world! Cat's rule.
And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our next guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, in 1946, Harvard Law School spent a whopping $27.50 on what it thought was a copy of the Magna Carta. It was dated as being made in 1327 under King Edward III. Fast forward to 2023 when Professor of Medieval History David Carpenter saw the document on Harvard's website and realized it might be an original. Further examinations revealed that the Harvard version was indeed an original, dating from 1300 and issued by King Edward I. As such, it's worth millions of dollars. But Harvard isn't selling. The Magna Carta was established in 1215. There are 4 of that original issue and 7 of the 1300 version, including Harvard's. Carpenter of King's College London said he was astonished that Harvard had been sitting on it for all these years without realizing what it was. Well, it's interesting and noble how Harvard isn't selling it. I mean, with their current woes that are in the news these days, they could probably use the money.
And we are forced to sign your precious Magna Carta, forced by you, a wool merchant. I am the blood I am God's right hand, and you will never dictate to me how I am to be a king.
Well, apparently Harvard is still dealing with kings. Anyway, let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff All program, shall we? Kathleen Troy is a dog lover who has been involved with dog training for over 20 years, and she's ready to share her training methods based on compassion, consistency, and respect for the dog. She is the author of Dear Dylan's Dog Squad, as well as a series of YA detective mysteries. Kathleen joins us via Zoom from California. Hi, Kathleen.
Good morning.
Thanks for being on the program with us.
My pleasure.
Now, obviously, you are a dog lover. You have been training dogs for 20 years. What led you to being the author, which I understand is sort of like a Dear Abby from a dog's perspective? What's Dear Dylan's Dog Squad all about, and how did that come to be?
Okay, it all began with a little dog named Dylan. So, the story is, a friend of mine was an American professor in South Korea, and he was lonely, away from home, and he decided to get a dog at Walmart. You can buy anything at Walmart in South Korea. So he bought Dylan, an American Cocker Spaniel, and I said, oh, well, you better train him. And he goes, no. I want a Bohemian dog, no restrictions. And I thought, good luck with that one. So it all went well until my friend got married, and Dylan ate the inside of their apartment, the electrical coverings off of all the wiring, their furniture. He ate the inside of their BMW. And when he ate their wedding pictures and the negatives, my friend said, the dog's going to Kathleen. So I got him and I started training him. By the way, he was 18 months old, didn't know his own name, and wasn't potty trained. Yeah. So we started working together. He was amazing. And another trainer friend of mine said, he's really smart. We ought to try him in search and rescue. And I said, but he's a little guy. He's a Cocker Spaniel. Well, it turned out he had a great nose. He could detect a dead body under 10 feet of water. And after a lot of training, Dylan learned American Sign Language. He knew agility training. He could count to 10, contact 911 with a special device, bilingual understanding, English and Korean, 500 word phrase and vocabulary. So there really are no bad dogs. And if Dylan can be trained to do all this, any dog can.
So again, the book, Dear Dylan's Dog Squad, as I said, it's sort of like a Dear Abby. So how did that come to be?
Okay, well, I would do school visits and book signings, and people always wanted to know, well, how do I get my dog to sit? And how do I stop my dog from jumping on people? And things like that. And I thought, well, you know what? I have a lot of these questions for people. I have a lot of letters, a lot of emails. I could put them together in a book. And people think it's a mysterious thing to train a dog. It really isn't. It really isn't. Just as you said, love, respect, compassion, patience, consistency, and I've got to be truthful here, yummy treats.
I understand that the real trick is that you don't necessarily have to train the dog. You have to train its owner or its human companion.
Exactly. Most problems are on the other end of the leash. Dogs, they just want to please you, and they want a job. So you're already halfway home, and all you have to do is just work with them and create a bond. It's pretty easy.
So what's the first step when you're dealing with a dog, a puppy, and does it make a difference what breed that puppy is?
Yes, because even though they're domestic animals, you have to realize what they were originally purposed for, and that there was a time when they were used to herd sheep. So they will want to, push you along. They want to nip at your ankles. They were used to hunt vermin. So they'll want to dig in your garden and things like that. So those traits never really go away. They're there, but they're still there. So some dogs are going to take a little more effort than others. And some things you're just going to be working with on a daily basis.
In the book, again, Dear Dylan's Dog Squad, you get questions from people. When you first started this, were you surprised by some of the questions you were getting on a regular basis, or was it just the typical things that you were expecting to get?
I was surprised in that so many people don't realize that they should be the trainer. They're the best person to train their dog in that they already have a bond with their dog. And so the dog is already going to be paying attention to you. So once I think they get over maybe that fear factor, I think they will be more successful and they'll relax a little bit and they'll find they have an easier job. Some of the things that they would ask, for example, how do I stop my dog from jumping on people? And that's a pretty easy one in that a lot of times people, when they see a dog approaching quickly or ready to jump, they'll shriek or they'll turn around, they'll back away. Instead, what you want to do is gently walk into the dog. You want to make it a bump, not an assault. And that will cause them to lose their rhythm, break their stride. And when they start to sit, because that'll be a natural reaction, then you say off. You don't say down because you want to use that for something else, like lie down, get down, something like that. So there's that. And I think there's some of the questions where people thought they should send their dogs to boot camp. And that's just so wrong because the dog will be trained with that handler at the camp, but you won't be trained. And when he gets home, he's going to think he's back to the status quo. You should try, some small dog training classes, maybe at your local pet store, things like that, where you can start to create that bond. And that's something special with you and your dog that no one else is going to have.
So basically, you're talking about training the dog, but with you as the trainer. In other words, training you to train the dog.
Yes, exactly. And it's not as scary as people think. And if you're having a bad day, don't make that a training day because your dog's going to pick up on it. And it doesn't have to be for a long period of time. It's better to do a skill or a command for 5 minutes. And then that afternoon, do it again. Instead of just relentless, because nobody likes to work like that. That's not fun. And it should be fun. There's nothing to say it can't be fun.
What about some of the things that people are concerned about, and that is when they go to work or when they go out, the dog is left home alone, and that's at a time when a dog can, out of anxiety, really tear the place apart.
Right. So as you were saying, there is that, and dogs are pack animals. So when the pack, that's you, is gone, there's nothing for them to do. And you're right, they get anxious and they get bored and things like that. Ideally, you should learn to crate train your dog. And this is beneficial for a number of different reasons, in that if you do it properly, you'll create a haven of safety and comfort. And I always tell people, leave the door open to the crate, just all the time. And you'll be surprised your dog will go in there on its own, like a doggy clubhouse. So later when you're perhaps at work and they're, anxious or the bored, they'll go in there and they'll find comfort. Or later on, when they become an older dog and you do have to leave them at home and maybe their eyesight isn't as good or their hearing isn't as good, it's a place where they'll be safe. So crate training, if done right, and those are the catch words here, can be a wonderful thing.
There are so many things I want to ask you about dogs and dog breeds and which puppy to get and which puppy is good for kids and which puppy is good for other animals that you might have, like kittens. But we're just about out of time. But I've got to ask you about your YA Detective Mysteries. What are they about? And tell us a little bit about how they came to be.
Okay, it's a Never Believe series, and it's about Sage. He's a down-and-out junior con artist from Las Vegas, and he's sent to live with family he never knew he had in Evansville, Connecticut, which he thinks is the end of the earth. So he's going to stay there long enough to steal their car, their valuables, and go to Florida. He's a very funny kid. But he learns about a murder mystery that occurred, 19 years earlier, and there's $1 million reward. And he figures, well, for $1 million, I can hang around. Unfortunately, the murderer wants him very, very dead. So it's not looking good for the hero. It's one of those stories that actually came from an incident in my family where my aunt accidentally murdered her husband. So she said it didn't count, but the other family members disagreed. So anyway, taking that little event, it transpired into this other story. So sometimes the bridge from one to another is long and circuitous, but yeah, that's how it happened. That's where I got the idea.
And what was the title of that first book?
It's called Never Believe a Lie Twice. And then the follow-up is Never Believe a Con Artist Twice.
Excellent. And those books, of course, are still available?
Oh, yes, on Amazon and wherever books are sold. All my books are.
Excellent. Kathleen, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us. We have to have you back and talk more about dogs.
My pleasure. I'd love to. Anytime.
Kathleen, thanks for being on the program.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Kathleen Troy, author of Dear Dylan's Dog Squad. She's also the author of the YA detective mysteries entitled Never Believe a Lie Twice and Never Believe a Con Artist Twice. You can go to our website at thestufffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0823, and you'll find the link to Kathleen's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order her books directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Giving you something to think about. This is Morning Shower Thoughts.
Since sausages are ground-up meat stuffed into intestines, then doesn't that mean that eating a sausage temporarily turns you into a sausage?
Morning Shower Thoughts from the Stuff File program.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestufffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestufffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
I'm standing and I'm fired up. For Canada. Hey, this is Sean Majumder, and I am so excited to have repatriated, self-deported from America back to Canada. This is where I want to raise my girls. This is where I want to do comedy and tell Canadian stories. Even saying the word Canada gets me fired up. Shop as if your country depends on it. Keep your money in Canada for Canada.
Coming to you from Canada, a place where fighting is frowned upon, unless it's on an ice rink. This is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. Now, the Stuff File presents Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy. It's radio that's out of this world.
Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is a member of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada and the author of National Geographic's Backyard Guide to the Night Sky, and also National Geographic's Stargazer's Atlas, the Ultimate Guide to the Night Sky. And Andrew, Varda, one of the smaller private companies, has had their third successful capsule return from orbit on April the 14th. What does that mean for smaller companies in general?
I think this is a really interesting development, and it's not really talked about much in terms of space exploration and the access to space. You know, one of the big movements right now is democratizing access to space, meaning that there is a lowering of the cost barrier of launching missions to low Earth orbit and being able to have this accessible to companies, to researchers particularly. And this little startup, what they specialize in is being able to put a payload into low Earth orbit, actually orbit. And in this case, this was their third attempt, third success story for them. And it was to test something for the US Air Force. This little capsule can actually make it through re-entry and come back to Earth with its payload. So this is really neat because, you know, you could think of, say, researchers at a university that have some kind of experiments that they would like to place into zero G, you know, or microgravity, basically, to see how the weightless environment impacts, you know, whatever it could be, a chemical reaction or maybe a some life form, like a plant growth or what have you, to see how that impacts that microgravity. It's something that you would do, say, on the space station, which can cost tens of millions of dollars to do. And in this case, they're able to place something into low Earth orbit, conduct their research or whatever you have, and then bring that payload back to Earth safely. And that's what they've done here with this particular third. Basically, I think they're testing out their system, and in this case, it lands in South Australia in this remote military test range, and it looks like it was a complete success. So I think it just shows you that small companies can really do innovative things in space and do it on the cheap. I mean, this is something that really opens up the doorway to so many different entities to have access to space.
On the other side of the scale, there was another small company called, which has the Athena moon lander, and it kind of tipped over. So what's the story on basically their failure?
Yeah, I mean, in this case, we're talking about this another private company, a small company called Intuitive Machines based in the US. They're now releasing sort of like the final report on what exactly happened to the lander that reached the south pole of the moon on March 6th. This was the second attempt by Intuitive Machines to do this. The first time they did that a couple of years ago, and they actually managed to land, but their lander tipped over. But it survived for approximately a whole week, 7 days, and giving back a lot of really neat pictures and stuff. Even though it was on its side, it still worked. It just tipped over because one of its legs kind of gave way when it touched to the surface of the moon. The second attempt this year on March 6th, unfortunately, it fell on its side very shortly after it touched down. What happened is that the solar panels on board couldn't get enough sunlight in that kind of tipped over orientation. And it was pretty much declared dead within a day of its landing. So while Intuitive Machines does still hold that record of being the first commercial entity to reach the moon safely, it just hasn't, even with the second attempt, it hasn't been that successful. And you have to remember, these landers are part of this commercial contract system that NASA has put in place, where it's given out billions of dollars to small companies like Intuitive Machines to take payloads, basically experiments on NASA's behalf onto the surface of the moon. These are all foundational private companies that are doing foundational work for NASA to eventually get humans to the surface of the moon, not just to visit, but to live and work on the surface of the moon permanently. And to do that, we need to learn more about the lunar environment. And that's what these small companies are trying to do with their robotic landers. But like I said, it's not easy to land. Intuitive Machines, this was their second attempt, and again, it tipped over. They're going to learn as much from this autopsy that they've done on exactly what happened. Part of it was actually very interesting, is that the tipping over was because the sensors that helped the lander assess what the lunar surface was like on its final descent wasn't working properly. The lighting in the southern part of the moon is not very good. The shadows are very long in the south pole of the moon, and the onboard computers weren't able to assess how safe the landing site was. And then so when it hit the surface, it hit kind of like a small little crater and tipped over again. So hopefully they'll learn enough from these two missions of all the mistakes that happened. The third attempt will happen early next year in 2026, and they're saying that they should be able to, they're running all these tests with on computers, artificial intelligence, algorithms to help them understand exactly what the lunar surface is like.
Okay, well, on that note, let's get to the elephant in the room finally here, and that's the fact that NASA's budget is being slashed and burned as we speak.
Yeah, I mean, this is a shocking development, but I have to put a caveat to this: is there's still hope, because it hasn't been approved by Congress. This is the 2026 fiscal year budget for the government that the White House, the Trump administration, is proposing for all government agencies, including NASA. And NASA's slated overall budget is supposed to be cut by about 25%. A quarter of NASA's budget would be cut, according to this proposed system that the Trump administration would like to put in place. And what's most shocking about this, it equals to about $8 billion loss for NASA. The shocking thing is some of the well-known programs that are affected. I think one of the biggest shockers to the space community is the Mars sample return mission. This is where we're supposed to get sample rocks and soil from the surface of Mars back to the labs here on Earth for the first time, so we can assess, was there ever life on Mars? What was the ancient environment of Mars like? Was it very much like Earth? We don't know. Some really fundamental science questions are now sitting on the surface of Mars right now as we speak. In small canisters, there's about 27 of these scattered on the surface of Mars that have been collected and placed carefully by the Mars rover Perseverance over the last 4 years of its mission on the surface of Mars, collecting very scientifically intriguing samples, putting them in canisters so that a mission in the future will be able to come and scoop them up and then bring them back to Earth. This Mars sample return mission has been talked about for decades. It's actually the crown jewel in all of planetary science, is getting those samples back from Mars. And it's not just in a blueprint on a desk somewhere. This is actually being built currently. There are already components of this mission, technology components built, and not just from NASA, but by international partners. And this whole program is slated to be cut completely. That's just one. The other one is they want to scale back the science and the crew complement on the ISS, the International Space Station, by half, and give a firm date of 2030 as the retirement year of the International Space Station. They're also looking at cutting completely some space telescopes that are designed to look for life around stars, planets around other stars, exoplanets. And there's one telescope, the Nancy Roman telescope, that's designed really to look at the atmospheres of these exoplanets. It's built, it's being just readied for launch, and they want to actually cut that completely, that telescope. There's also a cut they want to do of the entire STEM education program that NASA is so famous for. All their outreach and education that inspires young children, all of that they're expecting to cut as well. So it's mind-boggling what they're doing. And you may ask, well, why are they doing it? What do they hope to accomplish with this? The whole reason that the Trump administration is giving for this is they feel like they're in a space race with China. And they're very concerned that China will make it to the moon and Mars before America can. And so the idea is to shut down all these other programs and reallocate those funds to concentrate on getting Americans back to the moon and then onto Mars as fast as possible. It's really incredible. And in fact, one of the latest developments just coming through the wire is that they're even thinking of shutting down, of all things, the giant mega rocket booster that NASA has that's taking the Artemis missions to the moon. That's that giant rocket that they've had developed. You and I have talked a lot about it, and the Orion capsule that carries the crew members on top of that.
Yeah, there was the Gateway spacecraft and also the Orion spacecraft that are just gutted.
Yeah, this is all part of the Artemis program. So people are wondering in the community, those that are actually in the know, who are actually part of the workforce, who are taking care of these programs, they haven't been consulted, and they're like going, well, what's going to happen to the Artemis missions? They say in this budget report that Artemis 2 and 3 missions are safe. These are the ones that the Artemis 2 is slated for April next year, 2026. It'll go around the moon with 4 astronauts on board. Won't land. The landing will take place with Artemis 3 the following year, 2027. But everything after that is cut with this booster rocket, the SLS system, and Orion. So we don't know how those following Artemis missions will be impacted by these budget cuts.
And on that happy note, let's just end this segment right now. Tell us very quickly, in the brief minute we have, where we can find you.
Absolutely. So if people are interested in what's happening in the night sky on a weekly basis, I invite them to check my Facebook page out. I'm also on YouTube, both under The Night Sky Guy.
Thank you very much, sir.
My pleasure. Clear skies.
Andrew Fazekas, The Night Sky Guy. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0823. And you'll find links to Andrew's site to get your own personal autographed copy of his books. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. And boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. This Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
A Vermont inmate is facing more than 1,100 contempt of court charges after police say he repeatedly tried to contact the victim in his case. 51-year-old Todd Slade is an inmate at the Marble Valley Correctional Center in Rutland. Vermont State Police say he contacted or tried to contact the victim in his case 1,146 times via phone or internet between December of last year and March of this year. Police say he wanted the victim to tell investigators things about the case to get him released from custody. Slade remains in prison and will be arraigned on the new charges next month. Now, why? Oh, why would you think that contacting the victim in a case you are currently in jail for over 1,100 times would in any way, shape, or form work in your favor? One reason, and one reason only: you're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0823. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestuffile.com, and once again, Stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0823. Email me at peter@thestuffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as P.A. Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including kdsradio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WLSL-LP FM in Dade City, Florida, KZZH-LP FM in Eureka, California, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. While it may be an enjoyable, pleasant experience, some side effects may occur. Listening to Peter may cause bloating, drowsiness, Tourette's, web feet, or an oily discharge.